Hello and welcome. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I took the job at Northwood Frozen Foods because I needed it. That's the honest truth. 31 years old, divorced 6 months, 2 months behind on rent, and my car was making a sound that promised expensive failure. When the temp agency called about a night sanitation position at a food processing plant outside Ashford, Wisconsin, $18.50 an hour plus shift differential, union benefits after 90 days, all the overtime I could handle, I said yes before they finished the pitch. I drove out on a Sunday night in late January. The plant sat alone off County Road M, surrounded by flat, snow-covered fields that stretched to black tree lines on every horizon. Sodium vapor lights on tall poles made the snow look gray and old, even though it had fallen fresh that morning. The building itself was enormous, a sprawling complex of corrugated metal walls, loading docks, and humming refrigeration units that exhaled white steam into the freezing air. You could hear the compressors from the parking lot, a deep mechanical breathing that never stopped. Inside, the air hit differently. It wasn't just cold. It was wet cold, the kind that settles in your lungs and makes your teeth ache. The entrance vestibule had those rubber strip curtains and a blast of warm air from an overhead heater. But beyond that, the entire facility felt like it existed in perpetual November. Stainless steel everywhere, conveyor lines snaking overhead, the smell of industrial cleaner and something else underneath, something like freezer burn made into an atmosphere. Darla Voss met me in the break room. She was the night shift supervisor, early 40s, short gray blonde hair, skin that looked like it hadn't seen real sunlight in years. She wore a company jacket over thermal layers and moved with the economy of motion that comes from doing the same tasks in the same building for too long. Her eyes were tired in a way that sleep wouldn't fix. "Jake Mercer?" she asked, glancing at her clipboard. "That's me. You worked sanitation before?" "Kitchens mostly. Some warehouse work. I'm good with pressure washers and chemicals." She nodded without enthusiasm. "Pay attention during orientation and you'll be fine. Night shift is skeleton crew. Sanitation, couple machine techs, 1 supervisor, security. The line runs during the day. We clean and prep for the next production cycle. Straightforward work." She handed me a stack of paperwork, tax forms, direct deposit, safety acknowledgments. Then she pulled out a laminated sheet about the size of a placemat and set it in front of me with deliberate care. The header read, "Night Sanitation Freezer Protocol. Do not deviate." "These are the rules," Darla said. "Read them, follow them, sign at the bottom." I scanned the list. The first few entries were standard: lockout, tagout procedures, required PPE, chemical handling protocols. Then they started getting strange. Rule 3. Never enter freezer bay 2 alone after 1:11 a.m. Rule 5. If you hear a forklift in the freezer when none are scheduled, turn off your headlamp and stand still until it passes. Rule 7. Do not respond to anyone calling your name inside the spiral freezer. Use the radio only. Rule 9. If you find a perfectly sealed box on the floor with no label, do not open it. Report it immediately and leave the area. I looked up at Darla. "Is this a joke? Like hazing for new guys?" Her expression didn't change. "No, some of these don't make sense. The forklift one. You'll understand when you need to." She slid a pen across the table. "These rules keep the plant running. More importantly, they keep people accounted for. Sign." I almost laughed. Almost. But Darla wasn't smiling. She wasn't even pretending this was about safety culture or corporate liability. Her eyes held something I recognized from my time working overnight security at a hospital during college. The look of someone who'd seen things they couldn't explain and had stopped trying. I signed. She gave me a locker, a company jacket that smelled like chlorine and old sweat, and a two-way radio clipped to my belt. Then she walked me through the facility. Northwood frozen foods, processed vegetables, and prepared meals, everything from freezer aisle corn to microwave lasagnas. The production floor was a maze of conveyor systems, blast tunnels, mixing stations, and packaging lines. During the day, it apparently screamed with activity. At night, it felt like walking through the ribcage of something enormous and sleeping. The freezer zones were the worst, not because of the temperature, I expected that, but because of how sound behaved. Your footsteps echoed wrong, arriving a half-second late, like the building was slowly digesting the noise. Your breath clouded and hung in the air long enough to walk through it again. And there were pockets, places where the cold deepened without explanation, where your skin prickled and your hindbrain whispered, "Get out." Darla showed me Freezer Bay 2. It was a long, high-ceilinged room lined with pallet racks stacked 20 feet high. The floor was painted concrete with a faint yellow line running across the entrance. She stopped exactly at that line. "This is Bay 2. After 1:11 a.m., you do not enter alone. If you need something from in there, you radio me or wait until morning, understood?" Why 1:11? Because that's when it matters. She turned and kept walking, and I knew better than to push. The spiral freezer was next, a vertical conveyor system that carried product through sub-zero air in a corkscrew pattern. It was 30 feet tall, wrapped in insulated panels, and made a low thrumming sound like a refrigerator full of bees. Darla didn't take me inside. She just pointed at the entry hatch. "You'll clean the exterior panels and the drip trays. You don't go inside during operation, and you don't go inside alone even when it's off. If you hear someone inside, you radio me. You do not call out. You do not investigate. What if someone's hurt? Then you radio me." She looked at me directly. "Jake, I know this sounds crazy. I know you think this is overkill or some weird company paranoia. But these rules exist because people didn't follow them, and then we had to write them down. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I nodded slowly. "People got hurt. People got accounted for differently," she said, and walked away before I could ask what that meant. The rest of the shift was uneventful. I foamed down conveyor belts, scrubbed drains, and followed a checklist that kept me moving through different zones on a rotation. The work was cold, wet, and repetitive. Exactly what I expected. But around 12:45 a.m., I walked past the entrance to Bay 2 and paused. The yellow line on the floor looked older than the rest of the paint, worn down, like it had been repainted over and over in exactly the same place. And just beyond it, in the shadows between the pallet racks, I thought I saw something move, not walking but shifting like weight settling. I turned on my headlamp. Nothing. Just rows of shrink-wrapped boxes and the faint fog of refrigeration. I checked my watch. 12:47 a.m., 24 minutes until 1:11. I stepped back from the line and kept moving. By 3 a.m., I was exhausted, soaked with chemical spray and sweat that had frozen into my jacket. But I'd followed every rule on the laminated sheet and nothing strange had happened. Darla found me in the break room during my 30-minute lunch. She looked at me like she was checking for something: injury, panic, absence. "You good?" she asked. "Yeah, tired but good." She almost smiled. First night's always the easiest. I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to ask about Bay 2, about the forklift rule, about why she kept saying accounted for instead of safe. But I didn't. Because part of me, some old animal part that still remembered how to be afraid of the dark, already knew the answers wouldn't help. The second night felt different from the moment I clocked in. It wasn't anything obvious. The plant looked the same. Same fluorescent lights, same wet steel, same compressor hum vibrating through the walls. But the air felt thicker, like the building was holding its breath. Darla greeted me with her usual clipped efficiency, assigned me the same checklist, and sent me into the freezer zones with a curt, "Remember the rules." I did. I'd read that laminated sheet 3 times during the day while I tried and failed to sleep. Rule 3 stayed with me. Never enter freezer bay 2 alone after 1:11 a.m. I'd even set a quiet alarm on my phone as a reminder, though I felt ridiculous doing it. For the first few hours, the work was exactly what it had been the night before. I power washed the conveyor housings in Zone C, scrubbed the drains in the prep area, and foamed down the blast tunnel exteriors. The cold seeped through my layers and settled into my bones. My fingers ached even inside insulated gloves. But it was honest work, and the overtime pay made it tolerable. Around 1:15 a.m., Darla radioed me. "Jake, I need you to rinse down the corridor outside Bay 2. There was a pallet leak earlier, berries. It'll stain if we don't hit it tonight." I keyed the radio. "Copy, on my way." The corridor leading to Bay 2 was long and narrow, with insulated walls and overhead lights spaced too far apart. It always felt colder than it should, like the freezer was bleeding temperature through the walls. My boots squeaked on the wet concrete as I dragged the hose behind me, the spray nozzle heavy in my hands. I stopped exactly at the yellow line. The stain was there, a dark smear of frozen berry pulp about 10 feet inside Bay 2, just past the threshold. I could reach it with the hose if I angled the spray right, but I'd have to step over the line to get the pressure I needed. I checked my watch. 1:17 a.m. 6 minutes past the threshold. I stayed outside the line and did my best with the spray, but the angle was wrong. The water just sheeted off the stain without lifting it. I repositioned, tried again. Same result. It's just a line on the floor, I thought. It doesn't mean anything. But I didn't cross it. Instead, I radioed Darla. "The stain's past the line. You want me to wait until morning?" Her response came fast. Too fast. Like she'd been waiting for the call. "Leave it, I'll handle it during day overlap." "You sure? It'll take me 30 seconds. Jake, leave it." I released the talk button and stared at the stain. It was just frozen fruit. Just a cleaning task. But the way Darla's voice had sharpened, the way she'd cut me off, it made my skin prickle. I started coiling the hose. That's when I heard it. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of a forklift reversing, a rhythmic electronic warning that every warehouse worker knows by heart. It came from deeper inside Bay 2, muffled by the insulated panels and the rows of pallet racks, but unmistakable. I froze. There was no forklift scheduled. Night shift didn't run equipment in the freezers. Darla had told me that explicitly. The beeping continued, steady and mechanical, and beneath it I heard something else, a faint hydraulic whine like forks lifting a load. I leaned forward, trying to see past the racks. A shadow moved. It was subtle, just a shift in the darkness between pallets, a vertical slice of black sliding smoothly from right to left. Too smooth, too fluid. It didn't move like a machine, it moved like something pretending to be a machine. The beeping grew louder, closer. My hand went to my headlamp, fingers brushing the switch. I was about to turn it to full beam and shine it down the corridor to see what was making that sound when my brain caught up. Rule 5. If you hear a forklift in the freezer when none are scheduled, turn off your headlamp and stand still until it passes. My thumb hit the switch. Darkness swallowed me. The beeping was so close now I could feel it in my chest. Rhythmic, persistent, wrong. The hydraulic whine rose in pitch, and then I felt it. A vibration through the concrete floor, thrumming up through my boots and into my legs. Something was moving toward me. I held my breath. My heart hammered so loud I was sure it would hear me. The cold pressed in from all sides, and I realized I couldn't see my own hands. The darkness was absolute. The beeping stopped, right in front of me. I felt the air change, a pocket of deeper cold, sharp and invasive, rolling over me like I'd walked into a freezer door. My breath clouded, but I couldn't see it. I heard a faint creak, metal under strain, and then a sound I'll never forget. A wet, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across ice. It started to my left and moved right, slow and deliberate, inches away. I could feel the displacement of air, could smell something wrong. Not rot, but absence. Like the smell of a freezer that's been unplugged for days and the food inside has stopped being food. Then it was past me. The beeping started again, fainter now, receding down the corridor. The hydraulic whine faded. The vibration in the floor softened and stopped. I waited. I counted to 60 in my head, then counted again because I didn't trust my own pulse. When I finally turned my headlamp back on, my hands were shaking. The corridor was empty, no forklift, no tire tracks in the thin frost on the floor. No pallets disturbed, but there were footprints. Mine, coming from the direction I'd walked. Clear boot treads and melted spray from the hose. And beside them another set, not boot prints, drag marks. Long parallel gouges in the frost like something with weight but no feet had been pulled along the floor. They ran alongside my prints for about 10 feet, then stopped abruptly at the yellow line. I stared at them until my eyes burned. Then I keyed the radio with numb fingers. Darla. Her voice came back immediately. You okay? I heard the forklift. A pause, longer than it should have been. Did you follow the rule? Yes. Did you turn off your light? Yes. Another pause. I heard her exhale, slow and controlled. Good. Don't go looking for tracks. Don't go into Bay 2. Finish your checklist in Zone D and meet me in the break room. Darla, what the hell? Zone D, Jake, now. The radio went silent. I looked back at the drag marks. They hadn't moved, hadn't faded. They were there, undeniable and impossible. I left the hose on the floor and walked away. Darla was waiting in the break room with 2 cups of bad coffee. She slid one across the table as I sat down. I wrapped my hands around it and tried to stop shaking. You did good, she said quietly. What was that? You followed the rule. That's all that matters. That's not an answer. She sipped her coffee and stared at the table like she was reading something written in the grain of the laminate. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat and tired. The plant has rhythms, patterns, things that happen when conditions are right. We don't know why, we don't know what they are, but we know the rules work. As long as you follow them, you stay accounted for. Accounted for. Here, present, real. She looked up at me and her eyes were hard. You heard something that shouldn't exist. You did what the rules said, and now you're sitting here drinking shitty coffee. That's the outcome we want. And if I hadn't turned off the light? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I finished my coffee in silence, and when the shift ended at 6 a.m., I walked out into the gray Wisconsin dawn and sat in my car for 20 minutes staring at the plant. The day shift workers arrived in clusters. Normal people with lunch boxes and tired faces walking into a building that processed frozen vegetables. Just a job, just a plant. I drove home and didn't sleep. That night I came back. I met Eric Caldwell on my 3rd night. He was 26, maybe 27, tall, lean, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never having been truly afraid. He wore his company jacket unzipped, a knit cap pushed back on his head, and he had his phone out constantly, filming little clips of the equipment and cracking jokes to an audience of nobody. You're the new guy, right? he said, grinning as he leaned against a pallet jack outside the spiral freezer. Jake? Yeah. Eric, machine tech. I keep the conveyors running and the freezers from turning into ice caves. He nodded at my checklist. Sanitation, huh? Tough gig, cold and wet. Pays the bills. Amen to that. He glanced at his phone, swiped something, then pocketed it. Hey, you get the weird rules speech yet? The laminated sheet of crazy? I hesitated. Yeah, Eric laughed. Darla loves that thing. She acts like it's the Holy Bible. Don't go here after this time. Don't look at that. Don't talk to the shadows. He shook his head. It's old-timer nonsense. This place has been here since the 70s. You work somewhere long enough, you invent ghost stories to keep things interesting. You don't follow them? I follow the OSHA stuff. The rest? He shrugged. I've been here 4 months. I've walked through Bay 2 at 2 in the morning. I've heard the forklift everyone talks about. It's the compressor kicking on in the next building. Sound travels weird through the walls. I've worked alone in the spiral freezer. Nothing's ever happened. It's just a plant. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe the drag marks I'd seen were a trick of frost and bad lighting, that the cold I'd felt was just industrial refrigeration, that the beeping was a machine somewhere I hadn't accounted for. But I'd felt that presence in the dark. I'd smelled that absence. Eric must have seen the doubt on my face because he grinned wider. Tell you what, I'm doing a PM check in Bay 2 tonight around 1:30. You can watch from the doorway if you want. I'll prove it's just shelves and boxes. Darla won't like that. Darla's not my supervisor. I report to maintenance, and besides, she's on the other side of the building doing paperwork until 2. He clapped me on the shoulder. Relax, man, this job's boring enough without making up monsters. He walked off whistling, phone already back in his hand. I didn't plan to watch him go into Bay 2. But at 1:28 a.m., I found myself standing in the corridor outside the freezer, hose in hand, pretending to work. Eric showed up at 1:32 carrying a clipboard and a flashlight. He saw me and smirked. Couldn't resist, huh? Just working. Sure. He stepped up to the yellow line, paused theatrically, then stepped over it. See? No lightning, no demons, just cold air and frozen peas. He walked into Bay 2, his flashlight beam sweeping across the racks. I stayed at the line. For a few minutes I heard him moving around, boots on concrete, the metallic clang of a clipboard against a rack, the occasional muttered comment as he checked temperature sensors and door seals. Normal sounds, human sounds. Then his voice came over the radio, slightly distorted by the cold. Darla, this is Eric. I'm in Bay 2 doing the sensor check. Everything's normal. Darla's voice crackled back. Copy. I frowned. Darla was supposed to be in the office. Why was she monitoring the radio? Then Eric's voice came again, but not from the radio, from inside Bay 2. Darla? Something's weird in here. His voice sounded thinner, breathless. I keyed my radio. Eric, you okay? No response. Then the radio crackled again, and Eric's voice came through, calm, measured, exactly like the first transmission. All good, just checking seals. But I could still hear him inside the freezer, and he wasn't calm. He was breathing hard, fast. Jake? His voice echoed from somewhere deep in the racks. Jake, there's someone back here. I stepped up to the line. Eric, get out, now! The radio crackled again. Eric's voice perfectly steady. All good. Just checking seals. The exact same words, the exact same inflection. My blood turned to ice water. Then the knocking started. It came from inside Bay 2, a slow, deliberate sound like knuckles on glass, but deeper, heavier, like someone knocking on ice thick enough to hold a truck. Thud. 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 Eric, I shouted into the radio. Get out of there! The knocking grew faster, frantic, and beneath it I heard Eric's voice, faint and distant, saying something I couldn't make out. Then silence. Not gradual, not fading. Just gone like someone had cut a wire. I stared into the freezer. My headlamp beam didn't reach far enough. The racks swallowed the light. I pulled out my phone and called Darla. She answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "Outside Bay 2. Eric went in alone and now he's..." "Something's wrong, Darla." There were two voices. "Do not go in there. Stay on the line." I heard her moving fast, boots pounding tile. She arrived 90 seconds later, slightly out of breath, her face carved from stone. She looked at me, then at the open freezer entrance. "When did he go in?" 1:32, maybe 6 minutes ago." She checked her watch, then pulled out the laminated rule sheet from her pocket and read aloud, her voice flat. "Rule 3. Never enter freezer bay 2 alone after 1:11 a.m. If someone is inside, you must wait for the forklift sound to stop before opening the door." "The door's already open," I said. "And I didn't hear..." "Listen." I stopped breathing, faint, distant. From somewhere inside Bay 2. Beep, beep, beep. Darla's jaw tightened. "We wait. Eric could be hurt. We wait." The beeping continued for another 2 minutes. Then it stopped. Darla counted to 30 under her breath, then stepped over the yellow line. I followed. Bay 2 was vast and quiet. Our headlamps cut narrow tunnels through the dark. The racks stretched 20 feet high, loaded with shrink-wrap pallets. Frost glittered on every surface. Our breath hung in the air like ghosts. "Eric!" Darla called. No answer. We walked deeper, checking the aisles between racks. Nothing. No footprints in the frost. No disturbed pallets. No sign anyone had been here at all. Then I saw it. On the floor near the back corner, Eric's phone. The screen was cracked, spiderwebbed from edge to edge. But it was still recording. The red light blinked steadily in the dark. Darla picked it up with gloved hands and stopped the recording. She played it back. The footage showed Eric walking through Bay 2, humming to himself, checking sensors, normal, boring. Then at the 2-minute mark, he stopped. He turned slowly toward the camera, toward his own phone, and his expression changed. The easy confidence drained away, replaced by something I'd never seen on a human face before. Confusion so total it looked like betrayal. His mouth moved, forming a single word, "Oh." Then his eyes flicked toward something behind the camera, something tall. The phone dropped. The screen went black for a moment, and when it came back, it was just static. Visual snow, like an old TV between channels. But if you looked closely, you could see shapes in the static. Not random, deliberate, like something was trying to form. Darla shut it off. "We're leaving," she said. "Where's Eric?" "He's not here." "Then where?" "He's not here, Jake." We walked out of Bay 2 in silence. Darla locked the door behind us, a detail I hadn't noticed before. There was a lock, a physical keyed deadbolt that shouldn't exist on an internal freezer door. She pocketed Eric's phone and turned to me. "You're going to finish your shift. You're not going to talk about this with anyone else. When HR calls tomorrow, Eric walked off the job. That's the story. Do you understand?" "No." "You will." She looked older in the harsh corridor lights, worn down. "Go to Zone D, clean the drip trays, I'll handle the paperwork." She walked away and I stood there staring at the locked door of Bay 2. Inside, faintly, I heard it. Thud. 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 Someone knocking from the inside. I didn't sleep the next day. I didn't even try. I sat in my apartment with the lights on, curtains open, TV playing some mindless morning show I wasn't watching. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Eric's face in that recording. The way his expression had collapsed into confusion, like his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The way he'd said "oh" with the quiet surprise of someone who just realized they'd made a terrible mistake. And that knocking, Thud, 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 like someone trapped inside thick ice, pounding with numb fists, knowing no one would hear. I called the plant's main line around 2 p.m. The receptionist, a chipper woman who sounded like she smiled for a living, told me that Eric Caldwell was no longer employed with Northwood Frozen Foods. Did he quit? I asked. I'm sorry, I can't discuss personnel matters. Is there anything else I can help you with? I hung up. That night, I almost didn't go back. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 15 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, staring at the plant. The sodium lights made the building look sickly and unreal, like a movie set. The refrigeration units breathed their endless white steam into the black sky. Just a plant, just frozen food. I clocked in at 10:47 p.m. Darla was waiting in the break room, the same exhausted expression on her face. She handed me my checklist without a word. I noticed Eric's name had been removed from the board, his magnet, his locker assignment gone like he'd never existed. I need to know what happened to him, I said. Darla didn't look up. You saw what happened. I saw him disappear. I heard him on the radio after he was gone. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. She finally met my eyes. But sense doesn't matter here. The rules matter. Eric didn't follow them. Now he's not accounted for. Accounted for where? She closed her clipboard with a snap. Do your job, Jake. Stay in the zones I assign you. Follow the rules. That's how you stay here. She left before I could press further. I worked mechanically for the first 2 hours, scrubbing, spraying, moving through the checklist like a robot. But my mind wouldn't settle. I kept thinking about Eric's confidence, his smirk, the way he'd stepped over that yellow line like it was a joke. It's just cold storage. I found myself drifting toward areas I wasn't assigned to, looking for something, answers, evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Around 1 a.m., I ended up in the far break room, the old one that day shift didn't use anymore. It was smaller, shabbier, with peeling linoleum and a coffee maker that looked like a fire hazard. Metal lockers lined one wall, most of them dented and missing doors. A bulletin board held outdated safety posters from 2015. I wasn't sure why I went in there, but once I was inside, I couldn't leave. The room felt heavy, like the air was thicker. There were water stains on the ceiling tiles, and the fluorescent lights buzzed with a frequency that made my teeth ache. I stood there, breathing the stale air, and realized I was looking for something without knowing what. Then I saw the cabinet. It was built into the wall behind the broken coffee maker. A metal storage cabinet painted the same industrial beige as everything else, easy to overlook. The door was slightly ajar. I opened it. Inside, outdated first aid supplies, a box of lost and found items, a stack of ancient training manuals, and a spiral-bound notebook with a water-damaged cover. I pulled out the notebook. The cover had once been labeled, but the ink had run and faded. I could barely make out the words. Night Supervisor Log, 2019-2021. I opened it. The first few pages were mundane. Shift notes, maintenance requests, production counts. But as I flipped deeper, the entries changed. The handwriting got shakier, the notes got shorter, and the content got wrong. November 14th, 2019, third shift count, 6 in, 6 out. Bay 2 door found unlocked at 3:22 a.m. No one admits opening it, relocked, no incidents. December 3rd, 2019, 5 in, 5 out. Sanitation team reports extra footsteps in spiral freezer corridor. Could not verify. Advised to follow protocol. January 18th, 2020, 4 in, 5 out. That entry stopped me cold. 4 people clocked in, 5 clocked out. The next entry was 3 days later. January 21st, 2020, recounted 4 in, 4 out. Friday head count was in error. Operator fatigue, incident closed. But the handwriting looked different, forced, like someone had been told what to write. I flipped ahead. The entries grew more fragmented. February 9th, 2020. When the lake freezes hard, the plant listens. February 23rd, 2020. Mason says the line on the floor isn't for OSHA, it's older. It was here before the expansion. Don't ask how he knows. March 11th, 2020, Mason gone. Blizzard shift, 6 in, 5 out. Security footage corrupted. HR ruling voluntary separation. Mason. I remember Darla mentioning that name. The night lead who handled it until he disappeared. I kept reading. The later entries were barely coherent. October 2nd, 2020. If you see a co-worker in the freezer without a badge, do not approach. Ask them a question only they would answer correctly. If they answer wrong, leave. That wasn't on the laminated rule sheet. December 15th, 2020. It doesn't kill you fast. It replaces you slow. March 3rd, 2021. The closed section beneath Bay 2, old ice storage pit from the 60s. Workers fell in during an accident. Plant refroze before recovery. They're still down there. Mason said you can hear them on cold nights scraping at the underside of the floor. The logbook ended there. No more entries. Just blank pages. I stood in the empty break room holding the notebook and felt the temperature drop. Not gradually, all at once like I'd stepped into a freezer. My breath clouded, the lights buzzed louder. From somewhere deep in the plant, maybe Bay 2, maybe the spiral freezer, maybe everywhere at once, I heard a sound I'd hoped never to hear again. Beep. Beep, beep. I shoved the logbook into my jacket, killed the break room lights, and walked back into the main corridor. The beeping stopped. But as I passed a window that looked out over the loading docks, I saw something that made me freeze. Standing in the parking lot directly beneath a sodium light was a figure in a company jacket. Wearing my beanie, standing with my posture. It was facing away from me, looking toward the road, perfectly still. I watched it for 30 seconds. It didn't move, didn't shift weight, didn't breathe fog into the cold air. Then slowly, it turned its head. Not its body, just its head, all the way around, until it was looking directly at me through the window. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the main production area, surrounded by steel and noise and the mechanical hum of the line. I radioed Darla with shaking hands. "Jake?" Her voice was sharp. "What's wrong?" "I saw. There's someone outside." "Where are you?" "Zone C." "Stay there. Do not go near the windows. Do not go outside. I'm coming to you." She found me 5 minutes later, slightly out of breath. She looked at me, then at the window I'd run from. "What did you see?" I told her. She listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a key card, white plastic with a magnetic stripe. No label. "There's a maintenance closet near Bay 2, small, locked. This opens it." She pressed the card into my hand. "If the plant starts repeating your words back at you, if you hear your own voice on the radio, if you see yourself, hide in that closet. And whatever you do, don't look at the frost on the door from the inside." "Why not?" "Because it writes things, and if you read them, it knows you're listening." She walked away before I could respond. I stood there holding the key card and realized I'd crossed a line far more significant than the yellow one on the floor. I wasn't skeptical anymore. I was terrified. The rest of that shift passed in a haze of paranoia and forced routine. I followed my checklist with mechanical precision, staying in well-lit areas, checking over my shoulder every few minutes, listening to the radio for any sign of my own voice. Every sound, every compressor kick, every distant clank, every drip of condensation felt loaded with meaning. By 5:30 a.m., when the day shift started trickling in, I felt like I'd aged a year. Darla found me in the locker room as I was changing out of my wet gear. She looked worse than I felt. Gray skin, dark circles, a tremor in her hands she tried to hide by gripping her clipboard. "Come with me," she said, before you leave. She led me through the plant in silence, past the day shift workers setting up their stations, past the quality control office, past the supervisor's desk. We walked to the entrance of Bay 2. She unlocked the door with a key I hadn't seen before, older brass, worn smooth. "Step inside," she said. "Just past the threshold. Don't go farther than the line." I followed her in. The freezer was quiet in the way that only absolute cold can create. A silence so complete it pressed against your eardrums. Our breath clouded and hung in the air. The racks stretched into shadow. Darla pulled a flashlight from her belt and shone it on the floor. "Look." I looked. The yellow line I'd been so careful not to cross wasn't just paint. Up close, I could see it was layered, dozens of coats, maybe hundreds, applied over decades. But beneath the yellow, there was something else. A darker line, older. Darla knelt and scraped at the paint with a pocket knife. The yellow flaked away, revealing a layer of white paint, then gray, then something dark and rust-colored. "This line has been here since before the plant expanded," she said quietly. "Before the modern refrigeration, before OSHA, before the company even owned the building. What was here before? Cold storage, industrial ice. They used to cut blocks from Lake Mendota and store them underground, below Bay 2. There was a pit maybe 40 feet deep, lined with sawdust and straw. Workers would lower the ice down with pulleys and pack it in." She stood, brushing frost from her knees. "In 1967, there was an accident. A section of the floor collapsed during a shift change. 3 workers fell into the pit. It was February, deep freeze. By the time they realized what happened and brought equipment to get them out, the pit had refrozen. Solid. The bodies were still down there when they sealed it in the 70s and built the current floor." I stared at the line. "And this marked the edge of the pit." Mason thought so. He found old blueprints in the county records office, surveyed it himself. "The line matches exactly." She looked at me. He also thought the cold down there never really went away, that whatever froze those men in place froze something else with them. Something that learned how to move through cold spaces, through refrigeration lines, through the plant. That's insane. "Mason disappeared in March 2020, she said flatly. "He'd been handling it for 9 years, making sure people followed the rules. Keeping count. Then one night during a blizzard, he went into Bay 2 alone to check the boundary syndiku, and he never came back out. Security footage showed him walking in. Then the cameras glitched, nothing but static. When they came back, the bay was empty." She turned off her flashlight and the shadows rushed back in. The rules started failing after that, happening more often, more aggressively, like whatever was down there got hungrier once Mason was gone. "Why are you telling me this now?" She met my eyes. "Because you've seen it, you've heard it, and now it's seen you. The figure outside and wearing your clothes. That's how it starts. It watches, it learns, it practices being you. And if you're not careful, if you slip up just once, it gets close enough to make the switch." "Switch?" Eric walked into Bay 2 alone. You heard 2 voices on the radio, his real one panicking and the other one calm and measured. The second voice wasn't him anymore. It was what replaced him. She handed me the brass key. "This is a spare, for the closet. Keep it with you. If you ever hear yourself on the radio, if you see yourself in the plant, if anything calls you by a nickname only you should know, you get to that closet and you lock yourself in. And you wait. Wait for what? For it to get bored and look for someone else." She walked toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. If it gets inside your head, if you start hearing your own thoughts in someone else's voice, or if you lose track of time and can't remember what you were just doing, there's a phrase Mason used. He made everyone memorize it. What phrase? I am accounted for. Her voice was steady, clinical. You say it out loud. You say your full name, your clock-in time, and that phrase. It grounds you, reminds you, and that you're documented, real, here. She left me standing in Bay 2, staring at the old line on the floor. I walked out slowly, making sure to stay inside the boundary, and locked the door behind me. As I walked to my car in the gray dawn light, I passed the spot where I'd seen the figure the night before. There were no footprints in the frost, no sign anyone had stood there, but someone had. I knew it in my bones. I drove home, showered, tried to eat. Then I sat on my couch with the logbook I'd taken from the break room and read it again, cover to cover, looking for patterns. By the time the sun set and I had to go back, I'd memorized every entry. And I'd added something to my wallet, a small card with my name, date of birth, and clock-in time written in permanent marker, just in case I ever forgot who I was. The fifth night started like all the others. Clock in, grab my checklist, avoid eye contact with the day shift supervisor as he logged out. The routine was becoming muscle memory. Hose, foam, rinse, repeat, move through the zones in sequence. Don't think too hard. Don't look too long at the shadows. But around midnight, the routine broke. I was scrubbing the drains near the packaging line when my radio crackled to life. Jake? A woman's voice, familiar. Too familiar. My hand froze on the scrub brush. Jake, are you there? I need help. It was my ex-wife's voice. Not similar, not close, hers. The exact pitch, the exact cadence, the slight Midwestern flatness on the vowels. I'd heard that voice every day for 6 years. I knew it better than my own. Jake, please, I'm outside. I don't know where I am. It's so cold. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed the radio with wet gloves, nearly dropped it. Sarah? Oh, thank God, Jake. I think I'm at your work. I drove here to talk to you, but the gates are locked and my phone died and... Her voice cracked. I'm freezing. Can you come let me in? I'm at the loading dock. I was already moving toward the corridor that led to the docks before my brain caught up. Sarah didn't know where I worked. I hadn't told her. After the divorce, we'd gone full no contact, her lawyer's advice. And even if she'd somehow found out, she lived 3 hours away in Madison. She wouldn't drive here in the middle of the night. She wouldn't know the plant was running 24/7. She wouldn't... Jake? Baby, please, I can't feel my hands. That word. Baby. She'd called me that exactly twice in our entire marriage, both times during fights, dripping with sarcasm and hurt. It was a verbal scar, a private wound. How would anyone else know that? I stopped walking. I looked down at the radio in my hand. Jake, are you coming? The voice was patient now. Too patient. Like it had all the time in the world. I thought about Rule 7, do not respond to anyone calling your name inside the spiral freezer. Use the radio only. But this wasn't the spiral freezer. This was the main frequency. And the voice wasn't calling my name, it was using intimacy, familiarity, guilt. I keyed the radio. What did you spill on my shirt the night you left? Silence. Then, what? Jake, I'm cold, I need... Answer the question. I don't remember, The voice shifted just slightly. Less panicked, more annoyed. Why does that matter? I'm outside, I'm freezing. You didn't spill anything. You took your stuff and left while I was at work. You didn't even leave a note. The radio went silent. I counted to 10, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then a different voice came through. Darla's, sharp and urgent. Jake, where are you? Corridor E near the packaging line. Do not go to the loading dock. Do not go outside. Stay on the main floor. I'm coming to you. The radio crackled again. Sarah's voice, but wrong now, flatter, mechanical. Like a recording played at the wrong speed. We're short-staffed, Jake. We need you outside. Then my own voice answered, calm and distant. "I'll be right there." I stared at the radio. I hadn't said that. Darla found me 30 seconds later, moving fast, her face pale. She grabbed my shoulder and looked me in the eye. "Did you respond to it?" "No." I asked it a question it couldn't answer. She exhaled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Good. That was good." She took the radio from my hand and switched it to a different channel. "Stay on channel 3 tonight. I've isolated the main frequency. If it's calling you, that means it's trying hard." "Why my ex-wife?" "Because it's learning you. It goes through your head like you'd go through a filing cabinet, pulling out the things that hurt, the things that make you move without thinking. Guilt is a good lever. So is fear." She handed the radio back. "If you hear anyone you know on this radio, anyone from outside the plant, anyone from your past, don't respond. Don't even acknowledge it. The rules say don't respond to your name, but it's bigger than that. It's about recognition. If you recognize the voice, if you give it that validation, it gets a foothold." "Foothold into what?" "You." She walked me back to Zone C and made me repeat the grounding phrase. "I am Jake Mercer. I clocked in at 10:52 p.m. I am accounted for." Then she left me with a final warning. "If you see someone at the loading dock, even if it looks like someone you know, do not open the door. Just walk away." I tried to focus on work, but my hands were shaking. I kept the radio volume low and listened to the static between transmissions, waiting for Sarah's voice to come back. It didn't. But 2 hours later, something worse happened. I was rinsing the floor near the spiral freezer when I saw movement at the far end of the corridor. Someone walking toward me, silhouetted against the overhead lights. As they got closer, I recognized the gait, the posture, the jacket. It was me. Not someone dressed like me, not a similar build, me. Same height, same walk, same way of holding my shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. He even had the same scuff on his left boot. He stopped about 20 feet away, standing under a flickering light, and looked at me. His face was mine, exact, but the expression was wrong. Too still, too focused, like someone concentrating very hard on a difficult task. We stared at each other. He tilted his head slightly, and I realized with cold horror that he was mirroring me. When I shifted my weight, he shifted his. When I adjusted my grip on the hose, he mimed the motion. Then he smiled. Not my smile, something that didn't fit the muscles of my face. I backed up slowly, keeping my eyes on him, and reached for the radio. "Darla." Her response was immediate. "What's wrong?" "It's here. In the corridor outside the spiral freezer. It looks like me." "Do not engage. Do not speak to it. Turn around and walk to Zone D. Do not run, just walk." I turned my back on the figure and started walking. Behind me, I heard footsteps, matching mine, step for step, syncing perfectly like an echo made flesh. I walked faster. The footsteps stayed with me. I rounded the corner into Zone D and pressed my back against the wall, breathing hard. I waited for the footsteps to follow. They didn't. I looked around the corner. The corridor was empty. But when I turned back, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Written in the condensation on a nearby steel panel, as if traced by a finger. "Don't be late." I stared at the words until they started to drip and fade. Then I pulled out my wallet, checked the card with my name and clock-in time, and said it aloud. "I am Jake Mercer. I clocked in at 10:52 p.m. I am accounted for." The cold pressed closer, but it didn't touch me. Not yet. When the shift ended and I walked to my car, I checked the back seat 3 times before getting in. I half expected to see myself sitting there, waiting. The call came 3 hours before my shift started. I was asleep or trying to be, tangled in sheets, the black logbook on my nightstand like a cursed artifact. My phone buzzed and I answered without looking at the screen. Yeah? Jake, it's Darla. Her voice was tight, controlled. Don't come in tonight. I sat up. What? There's a storm, blizzard warning, roads are closing, day shift can't get out and night shift can't get in. We're running on emergency staffing. So you don't need me. A pause. Long enough to be uncomfortable. I'm telling you not to come because it's dangerous. The plant runs different when we're trapped, when the count gets too low. How low? 3 of us. Me, Daniel from maintenance, and Rodriguez from security. That's not enough to cover all the zones, not enough to keep the boundaries clear. Her voice dropped. This is when it gets hungry, Jake. When the storm locks us in and the heat goes out and the plant starts to remember. I looked out my apartment window. Snow was falling hard, the wind already piling drifts against cars. You're telling me to stay home. I'm telling you that if you come in tonight, I can't guarantee I can keep you accounted for. Do you understand? I should have said yes. I should have thanked her, hung up and gone back to sleep. But I thought about Eric's phone, the static with shapes trying to form. I thought about the drag marks beside my footprints. I thought about Darla standing alone in that freezer, trying to hold the line with 2 other people against something that had been eating workers for 50 years. I'll be there, I said. Jake, I'll be careful. I'll follow every rule. But you need the help. She was quiet for a long time. Then, clock in by 11 or don't come at all. After that, the doors stay locked until morning. She hung up. I drove through the storm with white knuckles and low visibility, the highway a pale tunnel through the dark. By the time I reached the plant, the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see the tree line. The parking lot was empty except for 3 cars huddled near the entrance like survivors. I clocked in at 10:58. Darla was waiting in the break room with Daniel and Rodriguez. Daniel was 50s, balding, with the calm competence of someone who'd spent decades fixing machines in terrible conditions. Rodriguez was younger, broad-shouldered, with the alert stillness of ex-military. Neither looked happy to see me. You shouldn't have come, Rodriguez said. I'm here. Let's make it count. Darla handed me a modified checklist, shorter, focused on critical zones only. We stay in pairs. No one goes into Bay 2, the spiral freezer, or the old break room. We keep the radios on Channel 3 and we do not respond to anything unusual. Every 30 minutes, we check in with names and locations. If someone doesn't respond, we assume they're gone. Gone? Daniel asked. Not accounted for. Darla looked at each of us. If that happens, we lock down, stay in the main office, and wait for daylight. No rescue attempts, no heroics, understood? We all nodded. She paired me with Rodriguez. You 2 cover zones C and D, stay together. I don't care if you're just standing there watching each other work. Do not split up. We moved through the plant like a military patrol, deliberate, cautious, checking corners. The storm had killed some of the exterior lights, and the backup generators gave everything a dim, brownish cast. The cold felt different tonight, deeper, more aware. At 12:30 a.m., the first rule triggered. Rodriguez and I were foaming down the conveyor line when we heard it, the forklift beeping, distant and rhythmic, coming from somewhere near Bay 2. We both froze. Lights off, Rodriguez whispered. We killed our headlamps and stood in the dark, listening. The beeping grew closer, and beneath it that wet, dragging sound, something heavy being pulled across ice. Rodriguez's breathing was steady, controlled. I tried to match it. The cold intensified, turning the air sharp enough to hurt. The beeping passed within 10 feet of us. I felt the displacement of air, felt that absent smell, felt the weight of something impossibly wrong sliding past. Then it was gone. We waited a full minute before turning our lights back on. Rodriguez keyed his radio. Darla, we just had a Rule 5 event in Zone C. Copy. Everyone stay on protocol. Next check-in at 1, squaws out. At 12:47, Darla's voice came over the radio again. Daniel, status? No response. Daniel, respond. Nothing. Rodriguez, Jake, where's Daniel's last known position? Zone F near the blast tunnel, Rodriguez said. We'll move there, carefully. We found Daniel's equipment first, his clipboard, his flashlight, his radio, all laid out in a neat line on the floor like someone had arranged them. No sign of struggle, no footprints leading away. Then we found Daniel. He was standing in the corridor outside the blast tunnel, facing the wall, perfectly still. Daniel? Rodriguez called. He didn't move. We approached slowly. Rodriguez reached out and touched his shoulder. Daniel turned. His face was wrong. Not different, not monstrous, just wrong, like a photograph printed with slightly incorrect colors. His expression was neutral, his eyes focused on nothing. I'm finishing the checklist, he said calmly. Rodriguez pulled his hand back. What's your daughter's name? Daniel smiled. I don't have a daughter. But I'd seen Daniel's locker. There were pictures, a girl, maybe 16, in a soccer uniform. Rodriguez grabbed my arm and pulled me back. Walk. Now! We backed away slowly. Daniel didn't follow. He just stood there watching us with that empty smile, then turned back to the wall and resumed staring. Rodriguez radioed Darla. Daniel's not accounted for. Copy. Return to the main office. We're locking down. But as we moved through the corridors, the lights started to fail. One by one, sections of the plant dropped into darkness. The backup generators whined and struggled, and then I saw it, near the entrance to Bay 2, lying on the floor in a pool of dim emergency light. A box. Perfectly sealed. No label, no barcode, just clean cardboard rimed with frost sitting in the middle of the corridor like an offering. Rule 9. I stopped walking. Jake, come on. That's a Rule 9 box. Rodriguez looked at it, then at me. Leave it. But as we backed away, the box moved. Not rolling, not sliding. It moved with intention, dragging itself across the floor toward Bay 2 like something inside was pulling it. The lights in the corridor dimmed further. The temperature dropped so fast my breath turned to ice crystals in the air. And Bay 2's door, locked, deadbolted, secured, swung open, slowly, deliberately. From inside, I heard a sound I'd been dreading. Thud, 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 someone knocking. Rodriguez grabbed my jacket. Run! We ran. Behind us, I heard footsteps, multiple sets moving in perfect sync, pounding the concrete in rhythm with the knocking. I heard Daniel's voice, calm and mechanical. We're short-staffed, come back. Then I heard my own voice echoing through the plant. This is where you stop being useful. We burst into the main office. Darla was there, white-faced, holding a pry bar like a weapon. She slammed the door behind us and locked it. 3 separate locks, industrial deadbolts I hadn't noticed before. It's accelerating, she said. The storm, the low count, it's accelerating the process. What do we do? I asked. She looked at the old brass key in her hand, then at me. We shut down compressor bank 3. It's the one that feeds Bay 2. If we cut the refrigeration, the boundary destabilizes. It might slow it down. Or it might let it spread through the whole plant, Rodriguez said. It's already spreading. Darla's voice cracked. Daniel's gone. The box is moving. The door opened on its own. We either try this or we wait here until morning and hope we're still ourselves when the sun comes up. I thought about Eric, about Mason, about the workers who fell into the ice pit in 1967. I'll do it, I said. Darla handed me a maintenance keycard and a map marked with red X's. Compressor bank 3 is in the sub-level mechanical room. You have to go past Bay 2 to reach the stairs. You'll be alone. I looked at Rodriguez. He shook his head. I'm not leaving, Darla. Someone has to stay and guard this door. I took the keycard, checked my watch, 1:11 a.m. exactly, and walked back into the plant. The corridors were dark now, emergency lights flickering. I moved by headlamp, following the map, every footstep echoing wrong. As I passed Bay 2, I saw them, figures in company jackets standing in the freezer, arranged in neat rows like mannequins. 5 of them, maybe 6. It was hard to tell in the dark. One of them was Eric, one was Daniel, one was me. They didn't move, they just stood there, facing outward, waiting for something. I kept walking. The stairs to the sub-level were narrow and slick with condensation. I descended into the mechanical room, a cramped space full of pipes, gauges, and humming compressors. I found Bank 3 and reached for the shut-off valve. My radio crackled. "Jake," my own voice. "Don't." I shut it off. I turned the valve. The compressor's roar died. The hum faded. For a moment, the entire plant held its breath. Then from above, I heard the sound of doors slamming open, one after another, like a chain reaction. And footsteps. Dozens of them, moving through the plant, coming toward me. I stayed in the sub-level mechanical room for 93 minutes by my watch, though time felt broken. Seconds stretching like taffy, minutes collapsing into nothing. The compressor was silent. The pipes ticked and groaned as temperatures shifted. Overhead, the footsteps continued their methodical search, moving in patterns that felt too coordinated to be random. They were hunting. I sat with my back against the cold metal housing of Bank 3, headlamp off, breathing as quietly as I could. The darkness was absolute. I kept one hand on the keycard Darla had given me and the other on the brass key to the maintenance closet. My last resort if things got worse. Around 2:30 a.m., my radio crackled despite being turned off. "Jake," Darla's voice. "If you can hear this, stay where you are. The doors have stopped opening. Whatever you did, it's working." I didn't respond, couldn't risk it. I just waited. At 2:47, the footsteps above me stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was the silence of something listening. I counted to 600, 10 minutes by heartbeats, then turned on my headlamp and climbed the stairs. The plant looked different. Wrong. The emergency lights had taken on a bluish cast, and frost-covered surfaces that shouldn't accumulate ice. Walls, conveyor belts, even the ceiling. My breath plumed thick and white. Somewhere refrigeration was still running, but it wasn't following the laws of thermodynamics anymore. I moved toward the main office, following my original path in reverse. As I passed Bay 2, I forced myself to look inside. The figures were still there. More of them now. 7, 8. They stood in perfect rows, facing the door, absolutely motionless. But their faces had changed. They were smooth now, featureless, like unfinished sculptures of people waiting to be carved into specific shapes. One of them, the one in the front row wearing my jacket, slowly turned its head toward me. It had no eyes, but I felt it seeing me. I ran. I reached the main office to find Darla and Rodriguez barricaded inside, furniture pushed against the door. They let me in quickly, faces gray with exhaustion and fear. "Did you see them?" Darla asked. "Yeah. The shutdown's confusing it. It doesn't know where the boundary is anymore, but that won't last. When the sun comes up and the day shift tries to get in, it'll stabilize again. We just have to last until then." Rodriguez checked his watch. 3 hours. We spent those hours in silence, listening to the plant breathe around us. Occasionally we heard sounds, metal scraping metal, distant voices calling names we didn't recognize. The soft thud, thud, thud of knocking from various directions, as if the entire building were hollow and something was testing the walls. At 4:15 a.m., I broke the silence. "What happens to the people it takes?" Darla stared at the locked door. "Mason thought they got archived, stored in the cold. Not alive, not dead, just held in suspension until it needs them. Until it needs to be them. Eric's still in there, I said. I saw him, or something shaped like him. The real Eric's gone. What's standing in Bay 2 is a recording, a freeze frame. She looked at me with hollow eyes. It learns you while you're alive, watches how you move, how you speak, how you think. Then when it takes you, it keeps the shape and discards everything else. The person you were gets compressed into a single moment, the moment you realized you were wrong about everything, and that moment gets played on loop forever. That's why Eric said, "Oh," I whispered, "on the recording." Darla nodded. Rodriguez stood and checked the window. Sky's getting lighter. We waited, watched the darkness thin to gray. Heard the storm begin to break. At 6:02 a.m., headlights appeared in the parking lot. The day shift, arriving in trucks with plows bundled against the cold. Darla unlocked the door. The plant looked normal. The frost had receded, the lights had stabilized. The figures in Bay 2 were gone, though the freezer door remained open, a detail no one mentioned. Management arrived by 7:00 a.m., annoyed about the compressor shutdown, irritated about unnecessary equipment disruption. They treated it like a maintenance error. Paperwork was filed. Darla was written up. Daniel was marked as voluntary separation in the system, his locker cleaned out by HR before noon. No one asked questions. Rodriguez quit the next day. I ran into him in the parking lot as he turned in his badge. "You're smarter than me," he said. "You'll leave too." "Yeah," I said. "I am." But I worked one more shift. I needed to see Darla, needed to understand how she kept coming back. I found her in the old break room, sitting alone with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. "Why do you stay?" I asked. She looked at me like I'd asked why she kept breathing. "Because if I don't, no one will. The rules will get forgotten, the count will slip, and it'll spread beyond the plant, into the town, into the homes. Cold goes everywhere, Jake. Freezers, refrigerators, air conditioning. If it learns how to move through those, if it gets out..." She shook her head. "Someone has to hold the line. Mason tried. He disappeared. Mason held it for 9 years. That's 9 years of people going home to their families. That's worth something." She set down her coffee. "You should go. You've seen too much. It knows your shape now. If you stay, it'll start calling to you from other places. Your apartment, your car, anywhere cold enough to hold a voice." I quit that afternoon. I moved 2 weeks later. Different city, different job, different life. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. For a while, it seemed to work. Then 3 months later, I woke at 2:17 a.m. to a sound that shouldn't exist in a third-floor apartment. Beep, 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 a forklift reversing outside my window in empty air. I laid in the dark, not moving, barely breathing. My phone lit up on the nightstand. An unknown number. A text message. "Shift starts at 11. Oh, don't be late." I turned on every light in the apartment and sat on the couch until dawn. When I looked at the dark screen of my television, I saw a reflection that wasn't quite right. Someone standing behind me, wearing a plant jacket, with my face, waiting for me to turn around. I didn't. I never did, but every night at exactly 2:17 a.m., I hear that beeping. And every night I repeat the phrase Darla taught me, the one Mason used, the one that might be the only thing keeping me here. I am Jake Mercer. I am accounted for. I say it until the sound fades, until the reflection in the dark glass stops moving, until the cold retreats to the places where it belongs. But it never really leaves. It's patient. It has all the time in the world, and eventually I know I'll slip. I'll forget the phrase, or I'll turn around, or I'll respond to a voice I shouldn't recognize. And when that happens, there will be two of me. One still trying to stay warm, and one standing in the cold, perfectly still, waiting for the next person who doesn't believe in rules. I am Jake Mercer. I am accounted for. I am still here. For now.